All right, let's move on to the fantasy playoff preview. Now, I've got a lot of these stats and sort of stuff from hashtag basketball. It's a great website. So if you want to look at them on a screen, I might throw a graphic up here on our video as well to sort of give you a visual. But we've got a few things to have a look at in general to look at the playoffs. So next week on most teams, it's week 16. If you had that double All-Star weekend week, or if your week split up into two, it might be week 17. But next week, most playoffs will start. And if we're looking at those things that go a 3-week playoff, there's a few things to note there that most teams will play 12 or 11 games over the 3 weeks. A total of 27 teams will do that. There are 3 teams, however, that have the fewest games, and that is Detroit, New York, and the LA Clippers. So I guess that means that the value of some of those players are decreased slightly. So there's not much you can do about it at this point of the season. With your Kawhis and Paul Georges, you just hold on to them. Obviously, they're your stars, but fringe players such as Sadiq Bey or Batum, RJ Barrett from the New York Knicks, those sort of players. Potentially, you want to maybe make an early move before those ads get used up. If you're looking good for this week, maybe try and find one of the, a fringe player from a different team that has a few more games. Load up your sleeves. What are your thoughts about some of those, like those 11, 10 game teams? Cap, Detroit, New York Clippers.
Yeah, look, I was a little bit sad because I got PG, so it will affect me. But you have to live with it. If he's a player at that level, you just have to put your money on your team, give it a crack. But otherwise, like on Detroit, I've got Mason Plumlee. I don't know, maybe I could consider, even if he's not playing too well, or decide if there's any news that he's going to rest some kind of game, which is possible. Maybe they do shut him down a little bit like they could with other players. I may have to get rid of him. So you just have to be very active on the news for those corresponding players.
Yeah, and if there's nothing out there, it doesn't make you mean you make a move. But if there is a hot waiver wire sort of addition that you can do before the playoffs start, then those type of players, like I said, a Plumlee or Sadiq Bey, who did have a really good game today, are expendable. Detroit do play, so I think they've already played a couple games this week, and then they've still got 3 more games with a 5-game week this week. So if you're trying to get into the playoffs, don't drop them yet. But when the playoffs start, those games do sort of dry up a little bit. I'm going to highlight the Clippers, especially here as well, because they actually have 9 playoff games in week 7. If you started week 17 the week after, so if your playoffs don't start next week but the week after, then this is by far the worst team, only having 3 games in each week. So it is a bit unlucky for you, Cal. There is a 4-game week that first week, so. I think in your situation, doesn't help because you've got the bye because you're leading our league.
That's it. Number one. I am number one. So I get to have a nice bye week. Straight to the semis for me. Straight
to the semis. Lucky you. So you can get yourself all set up for that next week and add in the players who are going to play really well. So those Clippers, unfortunately, they're the lowest games played of all the teams. I will highlight a few teams on the positive side. The Mavericks, OKC Thunder, and the Raptors, all 3 of those teams have a 5-game week in week 18, which is the championship week if your playoffs start next week. So that is a huge thing. So on that week, if you're really confident and you think you're going to make it to the championships, which I wouldn't recommend, I would take 1 week at a time. But if you're super duper confident, you could look to add a couple of those players. I think players like Moses Brown and sort of Isaiah Roby should be added anyway.
Should people be adding Pokusevski? Should they? If they're in the championship week?
Well, I'm gonna talk about him a bit later, but I don't think he's the worst ad in the world. I think if you can stomach his field goal percentage, or if you're punting that category, he's not a bad ad. I do love me some Poku, but I may be higher than most people. But on the flip side, the Raptors do have a 2-game week in week 17, so. That's a rough one. I know a lot of people have added Malachi Flynn this week with their 5-game week, myself included. But if you make it to week 17, which is not next week, the first week of the playoffs for us, but the week after, players like that, you can't have them on your team, because 2 weeks for a borderline rosterable player, it's just not enough value. You've got to move to a player that's you can get 4 games out of. I don't know, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or something, one of those guys playing 4 games versus another player playing 2. It's not enough value. So that's a big hit. Again, players like your OG Anunobis, your Pascal Siakams, Van Vliets, you just got to deal with it. But even someone like a Chris Boucher becomes expendable with 2 games, because who knows, maybe they sit Boucher for half a game like he has done, and then you're going to have, 1 decent game and 1 shit game. So I wouldn't hesitate in that week to, if you really need to, if you don't need his stats, you can move on to play like Chris Boucher. So just keep that in mind. And also the Detroit Pistons have a 5-game week in week 19, which is the championship week if your playoffs start in week 17. So not next week, but the week after. Won't affect our playoffs, but if you're starting that week, you can keep an eye on those Detroit players for that last week if you make the championship game. All right, we're going to talk about streaming. So, Cal, do you just want to give us a quick little rundown or a bit? We haven't talked much about streaming on our pods before, but just what streaming is and what you're basically looking for when you are trying to stream for those who are a bit new to this.
So you usually just want to look at the forecast, really. So you have a look at your week. You really want to pin down what are the really busy days. So I know sometimes with deeper rosters, you might have at least a full roster of players that certain day, which just means if you're going to pick up another player, you don't want it to clash on that particular day because it's not really going to boost you up as much as others could.
Yep. Of course, yeah. So, yeah, if you've got a full contingent of games going on, there's no point adding a player. But if you've got those days where you've only got a couple players playing, adding in those, having a spot dedicated for ads and just turning over that roster spot continuously is going to boost that games played stat, which is a big thing when it comes to playoffs. So, like I said earlier in our advice video, you want to add as many players as you can, go to your addition limits just to get the advantage. So we'll go through the week for week 16. So that is next week. We'll touch on these a little bit more each week. So we're just going to focus on week 16 at the moment if your playoffs start next week. So Monday, we've got 9 games. Tuesday, we've got 6 games. Wednesday, there's 12 games. So probably won't be able to stream that day. Thursday, there's a low 4 games, so lots of streaming available there. Friday, 11 games. Again, probably not going to be able to stream that day. And Saturday, 6 and Sunday, 8. So of that week, there's a lot of streaming opportunity, but we're looking at Wednesday and Friday, most likely, depending on your roster. You might have a spot, but for most teams, you're probably not going to have a spot on those teams. You might not have a spot on Monday where there's 9 games. So it is a bit dependent on your team, but in general, Wednesday and Friday, you're probably not going to be able to stream any players in. So that's what we're going to focus on teams that are playing on those streamable days. Anything to take away from that there, Cal?
Yeah, I guess it is just not leave it too last minute on the last day of Sunday. Because 8 games, you might find yourself with a full team. Depends who you have, obviously. You might. But you may find that does happen. And the Saturday with the 6 games, which yells at me for streamable. Thursday of the 4 days will be the other streamable days. So on those couple of days, I'd be very active.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I said about going aggressive and going early. I wouldn't be leaving my additions to the last minute. So I agree there. All right. So to take advantage of those, we're looking at back-to-backs. So we're going to start the week off. We've got Monday and Tuesday. There's 3 teams with back-to-backs on that day. And you could even make the addition before the week starts if you're looking pretty good and you're locking yourself into the playoffs, which I don't mind doing, especially going into week 1 of the playoffs. So to kick off the week, we've got the Lakers, the Phoenix Suns, and the OKC Thunder with a back-to-back Monday and Tuesday. Who do you like as options from those teams there, Cal, to stream on through?
You could get someone like a KCP for the Lakers.
Yep.
Just for maybe some steals, but 3s. Just because that Lakers team right now is a bit injury-ridden, so he should get good minutes. I don't assume that he's going to be rested. That's the other thing to be considered with the back-to-backs is there are some potential for resting. Yep. So you want to try and stay clear of that, obviously. Drop someone as soon as if it's obviously a fringe guy, they're going to rest him, get rid of him.
Yep.
Do you have anyone from the OKC that comes to mind? I guess most of that team seems to be a bit in and out.
They're a bit in and out, but I think there are a few things to look at here. So a popular guy in the last few weeks, he may not be available in your league, but he might still be there. Theo Maledon is a good assists and steals streamer. I like Ty Jerome for the same sort of stats, assists and threes, probably more so than steals. Another guy I like for threes and points is Svi Mykhailiuk. He has come over from Detroit. Shoots a lot of threes. Most of his sort of shots are 3-pointers and can get hot and hit some threes. And I do want to touch on my guy, Alexei Pokusevski. We mentioned him before. I think he's a good streamer if you need, some specific stats like threes. He can get you some blocks and some steals. Be aware of the field goal percentage, obviously, but if that's not a concern to you, I think he's a great streamer and has the potential to put up some big lines, particularly if you're missing someone like a Isaiah Roby, or if they've got other few injuries there at the moment. So there is some opportunity for him, and they're going to pump big minutes into him. So I think he's a good streamer from that team. Anyone from Phoenix, Cal? We haven't touched on Phoenix too much.
Phoenix, who comes to mind? Cam Johnson. He hits threes.
Yep.
He'd be a good one.
Threes. He and Jay Crowder, probably two three streamers. Jay Crowder might get you a few more steals if that's a concern. I like Cameron Payne as again, we're looking at streaming, assists, steals. If they maybe Chris Paul's rested, keep an eye on like those older players if they're rested on back-to-backs or they've got an easy opponent that might come through, or even if Paul's minutes are just lower because it is a back-to-back, Cam Payne might get a bit more of an opportunity. So I like them.
You could even go Dario Saric if he's healthy, if he's playing. He can be a pretty good waiver wire ad sometimes.
Yeah, and look, we're not looking to set the world on fire with these ads here. We're just trying to get
extra stats.
Yeah, these specific stats that you're looking for when if you go back to our video about advice, you've identified that, okay, this matchup, I'm going to be close in threes. All right, let's add Cam Johnson. I'm going to get 2 games from him. I might get 6 or 7 threes. Okay, bang, drop it, move on to the next guy. You're not really caring about the other things that he gives you. He's obviously not going to give you great field goal percentage and turnovers and points, but he's going to give you those difference maker stats. I want to touch back onto the Lakers because I think there's a few other ones I want to talk about there in Talen Horton-Tucker.
Yeah, he's on my team. I was going to mention him as well. Yes. He's definitely a get. He can get steals, which is can be pretty valuable. And he does a bit of everything else. He can have the odd game where he gets like 8 assists, which is really valuable too. So
yeah. He might be an ad just off the bat with LeBron James out. We were expecting him to sort of pop off, but he hasn't done so just yet. But he's getting there, and I think that with the depleted roster they've got, he's someone who can put together a few big lines. Markieff Morris has looked pretty good recently with some points, rebounds, and threes there. Maybe Andre Drummond coming back into the side limits him. So just maybe watch to see how that plays out. And Marc Gasol, probably going to be impacted by Drummond. But if Drummond's not back by that time, which he probably will be, he might give you some out of position assists and some blocks potentially as well. Let's move on to the Tuesday-Thursday. Now, this is obviously not a back-to-back, but as we highlighted before, Wednesday, you've got the 12 games. So this is, as Josh Lloyd from the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast would call it, a pseudo back-to-back. So, something, and a player you can add on Tuesday, let them sit there Wednesday on your bench, and then they play again on Thursday. So 3 teams there. We've got the Atlanta Hawks, the Boston Celtics, and again, the Los Angeles Lakers. So if you're really smart and you really like to play from the Lakers, you could add a Laker player like we talked about and get 3 games for 1 ad in the early part of the week. So your Lakers players are looking like a pretty good addition to start the week in the playoffs. You might even want to add a couple. There's a couple of 3 streamers that we identified there. But talk to me, Cal, about some Boston Celtics players that you could stream. There's probably not too many options there at the moment. Their fantasy stats are not too good right now, but there is a couple of low-end options that I can pick up. Who do you like?
Get Peyton Pritchard is worth picking up. And even Tristan Thompson if he comes back and plays some minutes. But, they're not going to scream at you. There'll be a bit of something, but look, that's all you really need. I don't see Marcus Smart being available. Maybe he is after he had a pretty long injury. He's obviously always worth rostering anyway. Maybe even, I don't know, is Wagner going to get some time? You could keep an eye on that. You don't think he will?
No, I don't think he will. I think I wouldn't bother with Wagner. I think Tristan Thompson, when he comes back, Luke Cornett and Wagner will be out of rotation. Basically, Tucker will be out of rotation. I think it'll be Williams and Thompson. So I like Thompson as obviously a rebound and field goal percentage guy. Big man stats. Pritchard, yeah, he's okay for some steals if you're really desperate. The other guy I wanted to highlight, he probably is owned, but he is sort of not owned in every league, and that's Evan Fournier. He's currently in COVID protocols at the moment, so potentially he could have been dropped due to that. But rostered in 70% of leagues. If you're in a shallow league, he might be available. He can give you obviously those points, threes, a trickle of assists here and there, but definitely, yeah, more that points and threes streamer in Boston now. Let's talk about who was the other team.
Let's do the Hawks.
Yeah, the Atlanta Hawks. Who have you got over in Atlanta? I'm seeing a lot of three streamers from this team here.
Yeah, there's a lot of, because it's such a deep team, and there's a lot of guys who still get a fair amount of minutes. So Danilo Gallinari, if he hasn't been picked up already, he has been playing really well the past month. So he's definitely worth an ad, especially on that period if he is available. Bogdan Bogdanovic as well. He's been coming back. He's had a couple pretty good games. So if he's on your waiver wire, he's worth picking up. You could even go to Kevin Huerter, who could be available. I don't know what his percentage is in leagues, but
he's actually only at 51% owned, which I was very surprised about when I was researching for this podcast. I thought he was owned in much more leagues. He's been really good recently. So yeah, I definitely think that Huerta is a good ad. Definitely, maybe even just as a keeper for now, but yeah, definitely as a points and three streamer, especially while DeAndre Hunter is still on the shelves, and he probably will be eased back into the lineup when he comes back next week.
And then we actually have the rookie who's finally healthy, playing some minutes off the bench. He can put up 20 minutes a night, and he could get you some blocks. So he's a bit of a block streamer, maybe some rebounds, and on Onyeka Okongwu.
Yep.
He is playing now, so keep your eye on him, especially if you need some blocks during that matchup.
Yeah, similar to Tristan Thompson sort of streamer, blocks, field goal percentage, maybe not quite as many rebounds, but he will still help you in those other categories as well, which are often sort of paired together there. So if you need one, generally you sort of need the others as well. Let's move on to the next back-to-back or pseudo back-to-back, Thursday, Saturday, couple of the same teams. Again, we've got the bloody Lakers. So they're on a lot of the low volume days. So this highlights to me that the Lakers are excellent ads to start the week if you can do so, if you've got a couple of spots that you can stream through. So I'm sure everyone in our league will be adding Lakers soon, or maybe you will, Cal. You don't have to worry about this week anyway, so maybe I will be. The Lakers are there again, the Boston Celtics again, but a couple of new teams, the Cleveland Cavs, Golden State Warriors, and the Milwaukee Bucks. So not the best teams in terms of streaming. I'll start with the Cleveland Cavs. If Larry Nance Jr. is not owned on your team, I would be grabbing him anyway. He looks to be back fairly soon, but excellent source of rebounds and steals. I want to get your thoughts on Kevin Love as a streamer. I know we're not the biggest fans of Kevin Love, but if it's just for a couple of games, do you like him as a bit of a streamer for threes and rebounds?
Yeah, he's worth a streaming ad. Like the past few games, he's put up about 25 minutes a game, and he had a 10 and 10, 3 assists, which is pretty reasonable. He had a couple threes, so if you can maintain the minutes, the only thing with him, I wouldn't be surprised if there could be a last minute pull. So there is that bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
There could be some game time decisions for him just because I think right now, Cleveland are pretty much out of the playoffs, so they could go into a bit of a full tank. So you never really know. I think there are some options that are a bit more likely in terms of, what about a Chetty Osman or a Taurean Prince? They've both been, Taurean Prince has actually been playing pretty well.
Yeah, I like Prince. I'm worried about how he's going to be affected when Larry Nance gets back. So for me, I like a lot of those Atlanta guys a bit better than someone like him. He's obviously a points and three streamer as well. So I'll be leaning a bit more towards those guys. But if Larry Nance is still out next week, he's a good option. I also not too sold on Chetty Osman. I just don't think that there's a I don't know, a particular skill that he does that I can rely on each game, even when he does get the minutes.
He's a bit of a gamble because I feel like most times he doesn't perform, but sometimes he has a good game.
Yeah, if you get really lucky, I wouldn't want to be risking it. I want to highlight one more guy for the Cleveland Cavs, and that is Isaiah Hartenstein, who has a bit of potential when it comes to rebounds, blocks, field goal percentage, and some decent points. This is on the assumption that Jarrett Allen is out, or potentially even if Jarrett Allen's coming back in and they're monitoring his limits, potentially they're resting him on a back-to-back and a tanking effort. So he is someone who's got some per minute value. And I think he is a good streaming option for those stats, rebounds and blocks. Let's talk about Golden State. Now, again, probably not too many options here. The only two really that I can consistently count on is James Wiseman and Kent Bazemore. Now, Wiseman he's not been good this season, but his minutes are slowly increasing, and he can get you some rebounds and some blocks. He is rostered, I think, in about 60% of leagues, so he might be available, may not be. And Kent Bazemore just for some steals. He is pretty good at getting some steals and has been playing some decent minutes recently. So someone, if you do need those steals, which can be hard to find, he's had 6 over the last 3 games. So someone you can get in and potentially get a couple of steals for a couple of games.
And also maybe a bit of threes and some sneaky assists as well.
Yeah.
And Jordan Poole, he actually probably is worth a shout out because he's putting almost 2 3-pointers a game. And you look at his most recently played, he's had a couple of games of assists where he gets up to about 6 assists. So you could pull the trigger on that too.
Yeah, I like Jordan Poole. Obviously, his stats have been boosted recently by Steph Curry missing some time. So I would keep that in mind. If Steph does miss, and he has been missing some random games here and there, he's an excellent streamer. But when Steph's back in the lineup, I would be tempering expectations. He might be a pure 3 streamer only. But yeah, and also just be aware of the field goal percentage. He is pretty awful in that category. All right, let's move on to the last back-to-back. And just to highlight, on Saturday and Sunday, the weekend games, there are no teams that have a back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday. So keep that in mind to maximize our teams. Like you said, you may have a full roster on that Sunday. So we're trying to use up these ads sooner rather than later, but it may just be that ad. Grab a player on those last playing games, see what stats are close, and sort of just get the best player you can. So not going to talk about specific teams for those days. I will just touch on real quickly, there is a couple teams with some Sunday, Monday back-to-back. So if you're crushing your league, you're pumping your opponent and you're going to move on to the next round, or if you're in a situation like UCal where you've got that week off, you've got that bye, these are a couple teams that have those back-to-backs leading into the next week. And that is Houston, Indiana, Miami, and OKC. We've touched on OKC a little bit. Do you have anyone from Houston or Indiana or Miami to talk about?
Did you have someone? You go first.
I'll go first. I'll get yours in a sec. So yeah, just from Milwaukee, I like Dante DiVincenzo. Probably should be rostered anyway, but if he's not, threes and steals, elite streamer there. And Bobby Portis is a big one as well. So Bobby Portis, we know, if he gets the junk time minutes, can go off and put up some big stats in points, rebounds, field goal percentage, and throw in some threes as well. Maybe a trickle of blocks in. So if I haven't looked at who they're actually playing, but if they have a soft matchup, or the Bucks can beat any team convincingly on their day. So he is a good streamer just to have a swing on that first day in your sort of week 2 matchup.
I've got one from Houston. You could say Kenyon Martin Jr.
Yep.
He's KJ Martin. He can be pretty good for blocks potentially, and he's had a bit of a boost in minutes recently. Even with Christian Wood getting reasonable minutes, so he's worth potentially an ad if you need some blocks.
Yep. One from Indiana as well, with Miles Turner potentially going down injured recently. Not exactly how long for, but keep an eye on Goga Badatse, who is a young big man. He is an elite block streamer, and if he gets the minutes, he is going to put up several blocks and could potentially be a bit of a difference maker if Miles Turner is out. If Miles Turner's healthy, probably not going to get the minutes to impact that category. But if he's out, definitely someone who I would keep an eye on. And when we get more news about that injury as it comes out, one that I would definitely look at closely. All right, Cal, that might do us. Any last sort of points in terms of fantasy playoffs moving forward?
Look, maybe I'll throw a couple more Miami boys out there. If Tyler Hero's there, he's worth a look at. And maybe even Trevor Reese has been starting some games. And Bielitsa, potentially, if there's a bit of an opening, it could be. Right now, I wouldn't add him, but things could change if there's some reason he gets a bit of a minutes boost.
Yeah, lots of threes and steals from those guys there that you mentioned. So they seem to be the most readily available stats to stream, which is why I tend to place a bit of less importance on threes at the start of the season. So that'll do it for us today. If you're watching along on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video. Let us know how you go in your fantasy playoffs. Let us know where you finish in your standings. We've helped you throughout the regular season, but this is where the fun stuff starts. And good luck to everyone out there in their fantasy matchups. We wish you all the best, and we'll catch you guys next time. See you later.